The silent struggle, when love becomes a battle within. At some point in life, everyone has stood before a mirror reflecting the broken pieces of their love story. It could be the emptiness of lying beside someone who once made your heart race, but now feels as distant as two planets on separate orbits. Or it could be the nagging doubt that this relationship isn't right. Yet the fear of letting go outweighs the urge to move on. No matter who you are, the experience shares a common thread. Part of you knows this isn't where you belong, but another part is afraid to face that truth. Many people choose to stay in a relationship out of fear of loneliness, fear of losing stability, or simply fear of starting over. They convince themselves that love requires patience, that no relationship is perfect, and that maybe they're asking for too much. But the reality is, love is not just about being together. It's about connection, joy, and mutual respect. When a relationship becomes more of a burden than a source of happiness, when maintaining it feels like an exhausting duty rather than a fulfilling experience, it's time for reflection. Some people realize they've lost themselves in the relationship but still hold on for external reasons, family expectations, societal pressure, or just because they've grown accustomed to the pain. But is a relationship truly worth keeping if it requires constant compromise and the acceptance of discomfort? Is it worth losing yourself just to hold on to something that no longer fits? The truth is, everyone deserves a love that is whole, a relationship where they can be themselves without fear of judgment or feeling unappreciated. Leaving a relationship that no longer brings joy is not a failure. It's an act of courage, a step towards opening doors to something better. Life is not just about finding someone to love, but about finding someone truly compatible, someone who helps build a meaningful and fulfilling life together. On the journey of self-discovery and cultivating healthy love, you don't have to walk alone. My YouTube channel, Practical Philosophy, is where I share deep insights into psychology, philosophy, and how to apply them in real life to help you find a love that truly fulfills you. If you're looking for practical advice, in-depth relationship analysis, and ways to enhance your self-worth, join me at Practical Philosophy. You will find valuable content to help you navigate the challenges of love and life. Jillian's story began in the same way. She once believed she was stepping into a perfect love. The man she chose had all the qualities of an ideal life partner: intelligent, charming, and responsible. But there was one thing she didn't realize at the time. Small issues, if ignored, would gradually turn into deep fractures. Love, at times, is like a flood. Once the dam breaks, no effort to hold it back can stop the inevitable. At first, everything seemed too wonderful for her to question anything. They laughed together, shared dreams, and planned a future side by side. But then, subtle signs began to appear. At first, it was just moments of distraction in his gaze, his avoidance when she shared something personal. She told herself it was just work stress. But over time, the silences grew longer, conversations became fewer, and his responses turned short and devoid of sincerity. Jillian believed that love was about effort and patience. She thought that if she loved him enough, if she persevered, he would change. He would once again become the man she had known. But love cannot be sustained by one person alone. When one side carries the entire burden, it is no longer love. It is unnecessary sacrifice. She realized that ignoring the early warning signs had led her into a cycle of pain, of efforts that were never reciprocated. She asked herself, am I really in a healthy relationship? Does love truly require this much endurance? And that was when she began to look deeper into herself, to uncover the subconscious patterns she had unknowingly repeated. Ultimately, she understood that loving herself was the most important thing of all. Before they got married, their relationship was 90% wonderful, but the remaining 10%, the odd silences, the sudden emotional withdrawal, the long stretches of disengagement, were things Jillian refused to confront. She told herself, no one is perfect, 10% problems are normal. But what she didn't realize was that, in marriage, those small cracks could expand into chasms beyond repair. At first, she dismissed those moments, thinking they were just temporary mood swings. But soon, the silences stretched longer. The signs of distance became clearer. Every time he shut down, she felt like she was standing in front of a locked door without a key. The feeling of being pushed out of the world of the man she loved became an invisible burden that weighed on her every night. She convinced herself she could change the situation with patience and love. She tried harder, cared more, even changed herself to fit his expectations. But over time, she realized that love alone could not fill the growing emptiness in their relationship. No matter how much effort one person puts in, a relationship cannot thrive if both are not willing to nurture it. And in that moment of realization, she began to seriously question her own happiness. Was this really what she wanted for the rest of her life? Was a love that required constant struggle, endurance, and sacrifice truly worth it? The answer became clearer over time, even though it was painful. Right after they got married, everything changed. The silences became more frequent, becoming a normal part of their daily lives. Once meaningful conversations turned into short, exhausted exchanges. Jillian gradually realized she was losing herself in the relationship, but instead of speaking up, she stayed silent, afraid of losing the 90% she had once cherished. She ignored the warning signs in the remaining 10%. She didn't know that over time, that 10% would expand and consume everything else. She felt like a ghost in her own life. The things that once brought her joy now felt like distant memories. Dinners that were once filled with laughter became silent meals where each person was lost in their own thoughts. She began to lose confidence in herself, doubting her own worth, sometimes wondering if she had done something wrong. She tried to make things better, cooking his favorite meals, paying attention to small details in his life, but nothing seemed to change. The distance between them only grew. Day by day, she felt more like an observer in her own relationship. She kept trying, but only to realize that her efforts were never met with the same energy. As time passed, she lost faith, not only in the relationship but in herself as well. The hope that something might change, that there was still a chance to save it, slowly faded away. Some nights, she sat quietly, watching him from across the room, wondering if she was holding on to something that no longer existed. She remembered the early days, how his eyes lit up when he looked at her, how their conversations seemed endless, how she had felt safe in his arms. But now, all she could see was an invisible distance growing between them, a wall she could never seem to break through. Time made one thing clear. Love cannot be sustained by just one person. One can endure, one can sacrifice, but without reciprocity, love turns into a heavy burden. And more importantly, Jillian realized that love should not be endured in isolation, but rather should be a journey of companionship and shared effort. She began to notice the small things she had ignored, the vacant stares, the dwindling conversations, the excuses to avoid moments together. She no longer felt warmth in his embraces, nor the care in his daily messages. These realizations forced her to ask an important question: am I fighting for love, or merely clinging to something that no longer exists? Awakening does not happen overnight, but as days go by, Jillian gradually realizes that love cannot be one-sided. She no longer wants to be someone who merely waits for change from another person. Instead, she wants to rediscover herself. She begins spending time doing things she enjoys, reconnecting with friends, and exploring the aspects of her life she had long neglected while trying to maintain a relationship that was falling apart. And then, she comes to a profound realization. Happiness doesn't just come from loving someone, but also from knowing how to love oneself, from allowing oneself to walk away from what no longer fits in order to find a better version of oneself. This is not just Jillian's story. It is the story of many people, those who enter relationships with the hope that if a relationship has many good aspects, the bad ones can be forgiven. But love does not work that way. A small crack in the wall, if left unrepaired, will eventually spread until the entire structure collapses. And when that happens, we often ask ourselves, why didn't I realize this sooner? But is it that we didn't realize it? Or had we seen it all along but refused to admit it? Human nature has a tendency to cling to stability. Even when that stability brings pain, we fear change, fear starting over, and above all, we fear loneliness. Jillian's story becomes even more complex when she realizes that she is not only battling her present circumstances, but also the wounds of her past. She grew up in a household where her parents did not love each other, a home filled with endless arguments. Her childhood was a series of days spent in tension, in fear of hearing their fights through the walls. Sometimes, she wished she could curl up, cover her ears, and disappear just so she wouldn't have to witness it. These childhood experiences deeply ingrained in her mind a distorted belief about love, that love meant endurance, compliance, and self-sacrifice to maintain something that was already broken. She learned to accept pain, to suppress her emotions in order to keep the peace, believing that if she was patient enough, loving enough, things would get better. But what Jillian did not realize was that she was repeating the same patterns, the very ones she had grown up witnessing. She was not just struggling with her partner, she was struggling against the fears deeply rooted in her subconscious. The fear of abandonment, the fear of not being enough, the fear that if she didn't try hard enough, love would fall apart. She did not know that true love is not about endurance, nor is it about transforming oneself to please someone else. Love is about sharing, understanding, and a space where both individuals can grow together, not a sacrifice made by only one side. And it took her a long time, filled with pain and self-reflection, to realize that she needed to change, not to hold on to someone, but to hold on to herself. When we grow up in such an environment, we often unconsciously recreate the patterns we once observed. If our parents had a distant relationship, we may find ourselves drawn to people who also emotionally withdraw. If we once had to work hard for love, to please others in order to be accepted, we will continue to do so in our romantic relationships, even if it leads to our own suffering. The scariest part is that we don't even realize we're doing it. Have you ever wondered why you keep falling into the same types of relationships? Why you are drawn to certain people even when you know they are not right for you? The answer lies in the subconscious. What we learn as children forms the foundation of our beliefs, and until we become aware of it, we will continue to repeat the same cycles. As children, we observe and absorb the kind of love modeled by our parents and the adults around us. If we witnessed coldness, emotional avoidance, or constant conflict, our brains register these as the norm for love. This unconscious familiarity draws us towards similar people, even when we know they are not good for us. This sense of familiarity creates a painful cycle where we repeatedly fall into the same types of relationships without understanding why. However, once we recognize these patterns, we can change them. Identifying and rewriting our own love story is not easy, but it is entirely possible. The key is to acknowledge that you have the power to choose, that you are not bound by your past. Observe how you react in relationships, uncover the deeper reasons behind your choices, and most importantly, learn to love yourself enough to no longer accept a love that brings you pain. But here's the good news. We are not victims of our past. We have the power to change, and that change begins with looking inward. It took Jillian years to realize that the problem wasn't just her ex-husband. It was also within herself. She had chosen to ignore the warning signs. She had chosen to stay silent instead of speaking up. She had chosen to remain in an unhealthy relationship out of fear that if she let go, she might never find someone else. But over time, she realized that this very fear had trapped her in a cycle of unhappiness. She understood that real love is not about the fear of loss, but about mutual fulfillment. She decided to put herself first, to face the truth with courage, and to reclaim her own voice. She started practicing self-awareness, identifying what made her uncomfortable, and setting clear boundaries in her relationships. She learned to love herself, to find joy in the smallest things, and to cherish her independence. No longer afraid of being alone, she instead felt freer than ever. She realized that love is not about finding someone to fill an empty space, but about finding a true companion, someone who helps her grow rather than slowly making her lose herself. Jillian was not alone on this journey. She embarked on the path of self-discovery, exploring the deepest layers of her mind and breaking free from old patterns. Change didn't happen overnight, but step by step, she learned to set boundaries, listen to herself, and understand her true worth in love and life. She started practicing habits that helped her reconnect with herself. Each day, she took time to write in her journal, recording her most honest emotions, the ones she had once suppressed. She explored activities she had never given herself the chance to experience before: walking alone, enjoying a meal at a cozy cafe, immersing herself in books that inspired her. She gradually realized that happiness wasn't about having someone beside her, but about what she could do to enrich her own life. She also came to understand that past wounds did not define her. What mattered was how she chose to confront them. She learned to let go of relationships that no longer served her, not out of resentment or anger, but because she knew she deserved a love that was whole. And in that process, she realized that the greatest transformation happened within her. The moment she started loving herself, the world around her began to change. You deserve a love that is real, a relationship that is not just about endurance but a space where both partners grow and find happiness together. Remember, the journey to rediscovering yourself is not a lonely path. You have the power to change and find fulfillment without compromising your self-worth. If you found this content valuable, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Practical Philosophy for more insightful lessons on psychology and philosophy. Leave a comment below. I would love to hear your story. Thank you for being here. See you in the next video. Sparkles.